Hi guys, in this video we will be doing a tutorial on how to use JsonWebToken to protect an API. So before going to the tutorial, before going to the coding level, let me introduce how this JsonWebToken works. So basically we know in protecting an API we need some authentication process. So first the user need to do registration process. So once he does registration process, now he can do the login, and if the user has a successful login, now he can access the protection routes. So that's how the basic authentication process works in web applications. So let's now understand how JSON Web Token applies to this authentication process. So the whole thing behind this JWT is based on this access key JWT token. So once the user has a successful login, he will get this JWT token. So only the valid users can have this token, so no one can manually artificially create this token. So in order to access share protected resource, he will need to send this token in his request. So the server will check whether the pass token is valid or not. If this is a valid token, it will give the access to access the resources, otherwise it will be blocked. So that's the whole point behind this JWT token. And now let's go to how to implement this JSON Web Token and how to protect an API with that. So we are going to implement a node API and protect it with JSON Web Token, and we are going to use mongoDB database to store the registered user, and I am going to use the mlab for as the cloud service provider to for mongoDB. So you can use either mlab, or you can set up mongodb locally and use that one. So I will use mlab for mongodb. So here you will need to create a new account here. So I am currently logged in there, and we need to create a new database. So here click on that new button, and we need to create who is our cloud provider. So I am using AWS, and you need to click on this sandbox, it's free, and click on this continue button. And here we need to select the AWS region for our hosting. So I will use this US East one, and click this continue button. Here we need to specify the database name. So I will call this as JSON Web Token application. You can choose whatever name you like and click this continue button. Here this is our summary, and you can see the total price is free because we use the free sandbox, and it will create our database now. Here this is my JSON Web Token application database which I created now. So in order to access this one, first I will need to create a user. So click on this users tab and click this add database user. Here I will need to add the username for this user. I will create this test user, and I will need to specify the password as well. So I will enter test user 123 and re-enter test user 123 and click this create button. So it will create a new user to access this database now. So here it has created the new user. You can see all the database users listed in this grid, and in order to connect to this database, we can use this URL. In here we need to specify the username and password of this valid user to access this one. So now we have set up our database to register and store users persistently. Now let's create a new Express API to access this database and enter new fetch new users. So let's go to the terminal, and now let's go to the desktop and create a new project. I will call this as new directory. I will call this as my app. You can call anything, and I will go inside this directory, and I will initialize a new npm project here. So if there is a error with the npm is not installed, you will need to install node.js. So you just go to browser and search for node.js and go to this link and download the node.js. So the npm is getting installed automatically with node.js. So we will use this npm node package manager to install the dependencies while creating this API. So I have created the package.json file. Now let's open this up with VS Code. So the my app directory is open here, and you can see there's a package.json file. So this package.json file is the kind of metadata to the node application. So in here our main file is index.js. so first we will need to create that index.js file. So before implementing our application API, we will need to install some dependencies. So let's go to the terminal and type npm install. We need express as the server, and we will need body parser to pass the form data, email and password to the to be passed in the body in the request. So in order to do that, we need body parser, and we will need mongoose. So mongoose is for connect to the mongoDB database, and we need JsonWebToken as well. Now let's hit the enter and wait until these packages are getting installed. So while that they are getting installed, let's start coding our application. So first we will need to bring the express. We will need to bring express, and we will need to bring the body parser. Let's see if they have success. So here you can see we have installed body parser, JsonWebToken, express and mongoose. So now let's continue coding, and we need to bring the mongoose as well. Alright, so we have bring the express, body parser and mongoose. Now let's initiate our application. Const app equals express. Here now we need to configure our body parser in order to pass our form data as URL encoded method. So let's type app.use, and here we need to pass body parser dot JSON. So we are using application JSON, and inside here we need to pass a JSON object including the limit of the request, which is let's say 50 MB, and again we need to specify what is the encoding method. So let's use URL encoded method, and again we need to specify the limit, which is 50 MB, and we need to specify another parameter here to make extended to false, right? Let's see, there is some error, so this should be inside this object, not here, in here. and the comma, right? So we have that one as well. So now let's configure mongoose. We need to specify the mongoose.connect, and we need to enter the URL to our database. So go to web here, copy this one. In here we need to specify username. So in my case, test user, and the password is test user 123. In here we need to pass another parameter as a JSON object, and we need to specify that the use new URL parser, otherwise we are getting a warning. And now we need to specify some actually we need, in order to apply, before applying the listeners, we need to instantiate our connections. So let's say db equal mongoose dot connection. So here we are creating a new connection now, and we can attach some listeners to this connection. So on when there is an error connected to making the connection, we need to console log that error. So we are having console.error.bind, and we will give the error message here, connection error. We are having a connection error. And if we are having once we connect to our database, if we having an open connection to our database, in this callback function we will have a console log giving us a message connected to database. So this will execute if we have a proper connection made. And we need to specify some what we call the API endpoint. So let's make root to a root. In here we will have a callback function having request response. So to check whether our API works fine, so let's send some dummy text to check whether if it is working properly. So what this mean is, if we make a request to this slash endpoint, we will get this message. So finally we need to listen on some port. So let's bind this application to port 3000, and here we will have a callback function. So if we have successfully created our API and started, we will this console message. Okay, so I'm on port 3000. So now let's start up this API and check whether this works fine. So I have nodemon installed. So with nodemon it will restart server again if we do some changes. Otherwise you can use node index.js. So in that case you will need to restart the server again and again if you make some changes. So since it is easy to use with nodemon, I'm using nodemon. So it will start our server. So here it will say app is running on port 3000, and it says successfully connected to our database. So now let's go to localhost 3000 and check whether this works. Here we get the message it works. So we have successfully created our API. So before going further, I would like to bring these routes to a separate file, because this is our server configuration, and I would like to add this route specific thing to separate folder. So I will create a new folder here as routes, directory called routes, and I will create a new file there as route.js. so all my routes will be inside this file. In here I will need to bring express again, and I will need to create the router. I will use this express.route, so I will have this new router here. So now I will make a new get request slash to the root endpoint with this callback function, request and response. In here I will send again a message from router. Let's make sure this one works fine as well. So at the end I will need to export this router as well to be imported to by another module. So module.export router. So I am exporting my router now. So in our index file I will need to import this one. So let's import this one as router from the routes directory. So now I will going to remove this one, and I will say app.use. so whatever the request coming from this slash, use this router. Okay. So every request with this slash, starting from slash, will go to this router with technically this file, and will it will again match the URL pattern. So if this is again slash, it will send this one as well. So now let's check whether this works fine. So now let's again, you can see the node 1 is restarting our server. So app is running connected to the database. Let's check. Here we can say hi there from router, so our router works fine. So now what we need to do is, so we need to implement the sign up process, the user registering. So once the user passes the email and password and click the register button, we need to register that user in our database. So let's now write that endpoint. So it should be a get request, so not a get request, a post request, and the pattern should be register, and here it will have again the request and response. And in order to register, first we will need to check whether this user is already registered in our database. So if the user is already registered, we should not be allowed to register him again, so he should be login again. If that email is not in our database, we are allowed to register. So before implementing this one, we need to create a schema for our user, a model in mongoose. So let's create another directory called models, and I will create a new file there as user.js. so you know this mongoose have this concept of models, and we need to create a schema for each entity, a collection. For example, for if we have some posts, we need to have a separate schema for posts. For users, we need to specify the user schema, and we need to enter what are the properties we are going to save. So now let's create our mongoose schema for users. First we need to bring the mongoose again in this one. We have bring the mongoose. Now let's create the schema. So we are feeding this schema using mongoose, and we need to specify what are the properties which should be included in this schema. So let's call this as user schema and create new schema, and in this parentheses we need to pass a JSON object including what are the properties we need to include. So basically we need to store the email and password. Email is a string and password is also a string. So basically these are the basic entry properties we should include in our user schema. We need to store the email and password, and finally we need to export our schema. So module.exports equals mongoose.model, and we are going to call this model as user, and our schema is user schema. So what this line is, we are exporting our mongoose schema. So our schema is this user schema having this properties, and we are calling this schema as user. So that's the meaning of this one. So now let's go to our routes file again, and now let's import this schema. Const user equals require, and we need to import that schema. So we are inside this routes directory. We need to go an upper level, and we need to go to models directory, and we need to bring this user. So now we have this user, and before in this registering process, first we need to check whether this we need to bring the email and password from this request. So since we are using the body parser, the form input, email and password will be inside this request body. So let's grab email and password from the request.body. So I am using this ES6 syntax for that, and let's do a console log and see whether we are extracting this property properly. Now let's do a post request and see, and let's send the email and password, and let's see whether we are getting this one correctly in our API. So in order to that, I will use the postman to send the API request. So let's open up postman. That's kind of a little slow. Let's say why is this taking so long? Oh man, let's open this one again. Seriously, it's stopped working, crashing. Seriously, it's taking a lot of time. Here it opens up finally. So let's make a new request to register, and we need to make a post request, and we are not using any headers inside the body tag. we need to specify the email, and we need to specify the password, and we are using this URL encoded method. And let's send this one. Here we have console logged the email and password properly, so we are actually getting the email and password properly from the body parser, which was sent by which was included in the request. So now since we have the email and password, now let's see whether we inside the database whether there is an old registered user or not. So in order to do that, we will use that schema which we created. So since we have this schema, now we can access database easily and see whether and we can query easily with this new schema. So in order to that, I will use this find one method here, this one, and I will here in this JSON object I will need to pass the criteria to find. So I will need to check whether there is an user with this email, so the email should match with email. So with this new ES6 syntax, I will enter that one as this, and here as the find one method, then there should be a callback function having an error and the user. So if there is an error while finding the user, an error will be thrown. Otherwise the user corresponding to this email should be thrown. So if there is an error, we will send that error in the response. So could be the user not be there, it could be some error in while searching, some technical issue, or could be anything. So if there is an error, we should show that error to user. So if there is no error, so there is no error while finding the user, so then we need to check whether there is a user or not. So if there is an user, it means there is a already registered user. So in that case, we should not allow to register him again. We will send him a message that the user has already registered. So if there is no user, that means there is no already registered user, so we are allowed to register the new user. So in that case, we need to create a new user and save those user in database. So let's create a new variable called the constant as new user, and we are using this model to create this new user, and we are attaching the email and password for this new user. So once we have attached the email and password to this new user, we are going to save him again. So let's call this new user dot save. So inside this one, we will need to pass a callback function with an error of the saved user. So if there is an error while saving, an error will be thrown. Otherwise the saved user will be returned back. So in here, if there is an error, we are sending the error back to user, so he will be able to show he will be able to see that error while saving. And if there isn't any error, actually we are successfully saved the user, and we will send a message that user saved. Right. So now let's check this one whether this works perfectly. So the node 1 is restarting our server, and let's send this back again. here we can get the message that user successfully saved. And let's go to mlab again and see if we have successfully registered our user or not. Here there's a new collection as user, and we have a new user, test user, and email and password was already registered there. So now try to re-register this one again. Here we get the error message, user has already registered. So we have registered that user already, and we cannot re-register that user again. So since we have implemented that functionality to register a user, now we need to send the JWT token for this newly created user, so he can use that token to use the protected resources. So in order to do that, we need to bring that JsonWebToken package. So let's bring that one as well. We call that as JWT and require JsonWebToken. So if we are allowed to register the new user, now we will create a token for this new user, right? In order to do that, we use this method function in this JWT package called JWT.sign. So in this sign we can pass some data while creating the token as well. So we need to include the email of this user inside this token. So with this email, the API can detect who is the user now. So once we have passed this token to this server again, it can decode this token and it will get this data. So in here we need to specify which data we should include this in token. So I am going to include the email. So let's add email as the user.email. So whatever the email saved in this user, I am going to attach it to this token as well. So once the user send this token again back to the server will be able to see and identify who is the user send this request now because of this email. And again I will need to here I will need to specify some secret key, some string. I will use the word secret as the secret key, and again here there is a callback function with error and token. So if there is an error while creating this token, this error will be thrown, otherwise the token will be thrown, the newly created token. So let's check whether there is an error. So if there is an error, we will send the error to user. So if there is no error, we have a token created, we will send those token to user as well. Now let's check whether this works perfectly. So now we can't pre-register this user again because the user has already created. Let's delete this one. This is register user, and we should be able to register now. Here you will get a token now for that registered user. I have this token now. So with this token I can access the protected routes, protected resources in this API. So now we have successfully implemented the registered part. Then now we need to implement the login part. So register is for new users. So once a new user is created, the token will be generated for him. So for the registered users, they will be access this application again by login. So once they log in, they will need to have the token again as well. So now let's implement the login part. Again we will need to create an endpoint, post endpoint to login. Let's call this app.post and make this as login, and we will need to have the error, not the error, request response. And similar to as previously we done, we need to extract the email and password from this request. Request dot body. So now we have the email and password, and now we will need to check whether there is a registered user with this email. So if there is no such user, we don't give him to access. So we need to send him a message that the email and password is wrong. So similar to as we done previously, we are using this user schema to find one, and we are passing this email, and we will have a callback function having error or user. This is very similar to what we have done in register 1 as well. So if there is an error, we are sending that error back. Otherwise, if there is no error, so we should have at least one user or no user. So if user has already registered, there should be an user. If there is no user, this should be none. So now we should check whether there is a user or not. If there is an user, we should generate the token. If otherwise there is no user, we need to send a message that wrong, let's say no registered users. So there is no registered users with that. Actually in that case we cannot generate the token directly. We need to check whether the entered password is matching with this user in the database. So we need to do another check here. We need to check whether the password of this user is similar to what he entered in the login form. If this is correct, we can now generate the token because the email and password is correct. Otherwise we will send a error message. We will send a message specifying wrong email or password. Right. In this case, we need to generate the token now. Similar to the previous case, we will use this JWT.sign method, and we need to specify what should be included, and we are including the email and the secret key and the callback function, error, and the token. So if there is an error, we are sending the error back to the user. So if there is no error, we are sending the token. So now let's check whether this working finally. So I'm going to use login now, post method in the body URL encoder, and I'm using the email and password now, and let's send this one. Here I can get the new token here. Let's say if I change this password which is wrong, and I am getting a message wrong email or password. So only the authenticated users now is able to get this authentication token. So now let's create a protected resource to access by only these authenticated users by passing this token. So now let's create a new endpoint, a get endpoint. Let's call this as something similar to get orders. so only the logged in actual authorized users can get these orders. Other users should not be able to get these orders. So this is a little bit different to what we did before. So we need to add a middleware function here called as check token. Let's call this function as check token, and we will add this callback function again, request and response. So before implementing this route, let's implement this function which is check token. So in here what we are trying to do is first I will explain how this works. So once the user makes request to this pattern, before going to this function, it will go through this check token function and it will do some pre-processing, and after this check token function it will go to this callback function. So first let's implement the check token function. So similar to the callback function, it will have request, response and the next in here. So first I will need to check whether the user have passed an actual token in the header. So let's hit this header now. In the request dot headers, I will need to check the authorization header, right? Then I will need to check whether there is an actual token in this authorization, whether this is undefined or not. So I will check the type of this header. Whether this is not undefined. So if this is undefined, we should not be give him access. So we are sending not allowed. So he should not be allowed because he haven't sent the token correctly. So if this is there is not undefined, that means he have sent some much token. So now we need to extract the token. Actually this token has some proper order. It should be in this format, bearer, space and the token. So the token is separated by this space, so we need to split up this string with this space and get this token. So now let's do that one. Let's call this as bearer, and we need to split with this space. So once we have splitted with the space, now we can get the token by getting the first element in this array. And now we are going to attach this token to the request, and we are now calling this next function. So what we have done is, so we have extracted the token from the header, and we have attached that token to the request, and we are now calling this next function. So what this next function doing is, now we were in this middleware function, we have attached the token to this request function, and we are calling next. So in this next, we are going to this callback function with this new request, the token also inside this request now. So now we can access the token inside this request. So now what we can do is, we can implement whatever our logic to give orders, get the orders from the database, and check whether this token is valid, and if it is valid we can send the data, otherwise we will not send our data. So now let's implement that part. First of all, we need to check whether this token is correct or not. So let's implement it by JWT.verify method. In this one we need to pass our token. So as I mentioned earlier, it will be inside this request now. Again we should pass our secret key here, and the error and the callback function having error and the decoded data. So I said when we were creating the token, we added the email in the as the payload in our token. So once we are verifying that, we will be able to get the email. So this is email. We can access our email once we are verifying the process. So with that email we know who is this user. Now let's check whether there is an error or not. If there is an error, we should send that error back to the user, right? If there is no error, that means the token is decoded perfectly. The token is valid. So in this case, if there is an error occurred, means the token is not valid. So let's send a message as you are not allowed, because the token is not correct. Otherwise, let's send a message as you can get the order. So what in here we need to implement the extraction, the fetching data from the database, the orders, and send those data to the user. So since we are not doing that, we are sending just a message including you are allowed, and here is your data, right? Now let's check whether this is working fine. So the nodman is restarting, and now let's make a get request to localhost get orders without specifying the headers, the authorized token. Let's say what happens. So we will get a message as you are not allowed. So basically we need to add that authorization key here. So our token authorization token, so we need to add the in proper format, bearer space and the token. So this token is only available for the logged in users. Here there is an error, you are not allowed. Let's do registration again and get a new token. Maybe it's expired. So this is the new token. Here I am getting an error message. Let's say why is that. Bearer separated by the token. And probably we need to set the content type to application JSON. Let's try now. Oh, we need to add in here. Is there? No, it should be working here. So now let's check what's wrong here. So actually first let's check whether do a console.log and try whether we are getting the token properly in here. Now let's send the request again. Here the token is not getting properly, actually that's the problem. So let's print the header here. let's send the request again. So here we are getting our token and this one correctly, so but we are not getting the we are not getting actually the token correctly. Yeah, let's check this token, why it's not working properly. It's weird error actually. Oh, this should be bare one. I have done some mistake. This should be token is the stupid mistake. This should work now. Let's try again. Here now we can allowed and we have access to data. So if we are not sending this authorization key, we are not allowed. If this token is not valid, let's simple remove this E and try. Here you are not allowed. So in order to access the resources, we should have this token correctly. Here you have the data. So this key is only can be this key is only available for the authorized users only. So only those will be able to access these resources. So basically that's how this JWT web token works. So I hope you got the idea, and that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.